Hi, dear friends. How are you? Hope that all of you are keeping fine. Today, we are going to see the fourth chapter from modern Indian history, that is, the rise of assertive nationalism. You may please take page number 105. Hope that all of you are following the classes and learning not only the history, all other subjects, because we will get only a limited time when you back to school. So you may please follow all the classes, not only any particular classes, all the classes you follow very thoroughly. And if there is any doubts, you clarify with your teachers. From modern Indian history, last time we learned program and achievement of the early nationalist. And today we are going to see the rise of assertive nationalism. And in the last chapter we had seen that the story of freedom struggle or the movement for the freedom, the national freedom movement revolved around the Indian National Congress. And there were three distinct phases of Indian national movement. We discussed the first one, that was the era of early nationalism. And the first one, the era of early nationalism, and the second one, the era of assertive nationalism. Today we are going to discuss the fourth chapter from modern Indian history, that is the rise of assertive nationalism. You may please take page number 106, and in the first paragraph it is given that the period of assertive nationalism, it was from 1905 to 1918. And even the assertive nationalism was existing in India once the national movement started in India. Bal Gangadhar Tilak was one of the prominent leaders of assertive nationalism, and there were some other leaders like Bipin Chandrapal, Lala Lajpat Rai, and Aurobindo Ghosh. And the assertive nationalism or the national movement was led by such a kind of prominent leaders, and it was known as the era of assertive nationalism. For the growth of the assertive nationalism in India, there were many trends, and now we will see the reasons for the rise of assertive nationalism in India. The next point, reasons for the growth of assertive trend in freedom struggle. First point, it is famine and plague. In 1896-97, famine started in Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh and Bombay. And in Madras presidencies, the outbreak of plague and cholera further added to the miseries of the people. The people were suffering from great famine in North India, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh and Bombay. And in southern India, in Madras presidency, people were affected with the plague and cholera. So in order to study the conditions of the people, the British government appointed a famine commission, but it was a failure. And the report of commission was still under the consideration. Then again the famine started in many of the places like Bombay presidency, Madhya Pradesh, the Punjab and Rajapatna. And during the time of famine, British government did not do anything for the betterment of the people. Instead of that, some of the economic policies of British government caused more disaster to the life of the people. And even the British government they had spent huge amount of money on the Silver Jubilee celebration of the Queen Victoria's accession. So for these reasons, the famine and the plague was going on everywhere in India, and people were in a great struggle and they were suffering from famine and plague, but the British government did not pay attention for the sufferings of the people. Instead of that, they spent more money for the celebrations. Because of these reasons, the people felt very bad and they wanted to take revenge against British government. The Chapekar brothers killed the British plague commissioner, Mr. Rand. The reason for that, the British government did not do anything for the betterment of the people. And at the same time, the soldiers were appointed in order to give some kind of people to the some kind of help to the people. But even these soldiers, they were so rude and they ill-treated the women, children, and even they invaded and stolen the wealth of the people. And in this occasion, Bala Gangadhar Tilak, he came forward and told the people that do not pay the land revenue if their crops fail. The authorities arrested because he was standing against the government. So the authorities felt very bad and they arrested Bal Gangadhar Tilak, and he continuously criticized the government. So the first reason, the calamities of the people, the unjust policy of British and the imprisonment of Tilak collectively contributed to the rise of aggressive nationalism. The first point is that one. The second point, it is the international events. Some of the international events occurred in different parts of the world also contributed for the rise of assertive nationalism in India. Example, revolutionary movements in Ireland, Russia, Egypt, Turkey and China, and the Boer War in South Africa contributed for the rise of assertive nationalism in India. And such kind of movements in different parts of the world convinced the Indians that a united popular front could challenge even the most powerful government. So, from the examples from the international levels or the events, the people of India, they understood that they could also challenge the most powerful government if they are united. And then the rise of modern Japan. Japan was a Asian country and backward Asian country, and it became a most developed country by that time. And it was an evidence for the Indians that without the Western control, Asian countries can be developed. And the defeat of the Italian army by the Ethiopians, African country. The Italian army was defeated by the African country, and it convinced the Indians that the European superiority is no more there. Even the Europeans can be defeated, and the European government, British government can be defeated. They felt that if the European nation could be defeated, it would be possible for the Indians to drive the British away from India. The third point, it is the deteriorating economic condition. That means the economic condition in India was worsening. And because of the British rule, the Indian economy was ruined, and everywhere unemployment and price raise. And the number of educated Indians increased, but they did not get enough job and they did not get enough salaries. So they started to criticize the British policies and the British government, and many of them attracted by assertive politics. That is the third point. The next one, it is the ill treatment of Indians in South Africa. Some of the Indians were working in South Africa, and they were denied the right to cast their vote in South Africa. The Indians, those who lived in South Africa, they did not have any right to cast their vote, and they were unfairly taxed, more tax to the Indians. And the racial discrimination was everywhere in South Africa, and they were subject to the racial discrimination, and they were not allowed to use the railway coaches and the buses scheduled for the whites, and they had to carry their identity cards along with them according to the Registration Act. So such a kind of attitude towards the Indians, it was something very bad, and Indians felt very bad. They started to react against that one, and many of them attracted by the assertive politics. The next point, it is the repressive policy of Lord Curzon. And Lord Curzon, he was having anti-Congress attitude, and he convinced the Indians that it was useless to expect any political and economic advance during the British rule. And he introduced Indian Official Secrets Act in order to restrict the freedom of the press. And at the same time, the Tilak, he wrote in Kesari, in the newspaper published by Tilak, he wrote that, and he justified Shivaji's assassination of the Bijapur general Afzal Khan, and for this reason the British accused him for sedition and he was jailed for 2 years. And then there were some of the reasons why the repressive policies of the Lord Curzon affect the national spirit of Indians. And the real confrontation between Curzon and the nationalists came through 3 successive measures. First one, changes in the Calcutta Corporation Act in 1899. Second one, the Universities Act of 1904. Third one, the partition of Bengal in 1905. First, we will see the Calcutta Corporation Act. In 1899, the Calcutta Corporation Act reduced the number of elected Indian members in Calcutta Corporation. So, the Calcutta Corporation Act reduced the elected Indian members in the Calcutta Corporation, and instead of that, it was more directly connected with the interest of the Calcutta European business community, and which had complained about delays in the grant of licenses. And the second one, University Act. Lord Curzon found that, and he thought that the Indian universities and colleges had become the places of propaganda against the British imperialism. So the teachings there in the universities or the colleges in India promoted the movements against the British imperialism, Lord Curzon thought. So he wanted to bring a strict control. He wanted to restrict the power of university. And with this purpose, he introduced the University Act of 1904. And by bringing this act, he put certain restrictions on the Indian universities. And what were the restrictions? The act cut down the number of elected Senate members and increase the number of official elements in the management of the universities, so that the university senate and the syndicates became the official organs of the government. Instead of the elected members, they appointed official element, official people, so that it was directly connected with the government. Educated Indians were against such a kind of practices put forward by Lord Curzon. They were against the University Act, and they also stood with the assertive politics. And the next point, it is the partition of Bengal. Lord Curzon's most unpopular measure was the partition of Bengal. The more unpopular measure by Lord Curzon, it was partition of Bengal, and he divided Bengal into 2 provinces. On 20th July 1905, Lord Curzon issued an order dividing the province of Bengal into 2 parts, Eastern Bengal and Assam, and the second one, Western Bengal, remained joined with Bihar and Orissa. And the reason, it was said that the existing provinces of Bengal was too big to efficiently controlled by a single governor. That was the reason given by the British government, that the area was something very large and it was very difficult to control that area. So it was partitioned. But the real reason was that the real motive behind the partition of Bengal was to crush the rising tide of nationalism in Bengal. The national movements were there in Bengal. Many people used to participate in that one. And the British government thought of crushing such a kind of activities rising from Bengal, and the reason was that for the division of Bengal was to crush the rising tide of nationalism in Bengal. And he used the divide and rule policy of British government, because he started to give some kind of aid to the Salimullah, the Nawab of Dhaka, and he became the favorite of Curzon by his backing of the partition, and he was granted a huge government loan at a nominal interest. So the purpose of Curzon was to create enmity between the Hindus and Muslims of Bengal, and there also British government used their policy of divide and rule by creating enmity between Hindus and Muslims, dividing the people into 2 parts. And this time, the Indian nationalists point out that administrative efficiency could have been better secured by detaching the Hindi-speaking Bihar and Oriya-speaking Orissa from Bengal. So the administration was something very easy. Instead of dividing Bengal in such a way as Curzon divided, the nationalists believed that it is better to detach the Hindi-speaking Bihar and Oriya-speaking Orissa from Bengal. That was a better option. But instead of that, Curzon divided the Bengal into two parts. The first one, Eastern Bengal and Assam, and the second one, Western Bengal and Bihar and Orissa. And it was something against the public opinion. The division of Bengal was totally against the public opinion and people. It affected the sentiments of people, and thus the partition was a blow to the sentiments of the Bengalis, and the anti-partition movement was launched on 7th August 1905. So far we have seen some of the reasons for the growth of assertive trend in freedom struggle. The first one, famine and plague. Then the international events. Third one, the deteriorating economic conditions. Fourth one, ill treatment of Indians in South Africa. And the fourth one, the repressive policies of Lord Curzon. Under the repressive policy of Lord Curzon, we have seen three facts. First one, Calcutta Corporation Act and University Act and partition of Bengal. Now we will see the split in the Congress. We know there are two types of nationalist people, early nationalist and the assertive nationalist. And there was an unpleasant quarrel and confusion between these two groups, early nationalist and the assertive nationalist. And in the Kolkata session of the Congress 1906, presided over by Dadabhai Naoroji, and it passed the famous resolutions of Swaraj, Swadeshi, boycott and national education. This proved that the spirit of dynamic approach was gradually becoming popular in the Congress. So the spirit of dynamic approach was gradually becoming popular in the Congress because of the influence of the assertive nationalist people. And though the early nationalists were not satisfied with the new trend in politics, yet they had to pass these resolutions. The early nationalists, they were not that much happy with the dynamic approach in Congress, and the Congress was trying to pass the resolutions like Swaraj, Swadeshi, boycott and national education. Such kind of trends the early nationalists were against, but they had to pass these resolutions, so they agreed. But at the same time, they emphasized that Swaraj should be attained through constitutional method without going and put pressure on the British government. The early nationalists, they believed that by constitutional method and by pleading to the British government attain the Swaraj. But on the other hand, the assertive nationalists, they believed that Indians would not be able to attain Swaraj unless they put pressure on the British government. The ideological differences between the early nationalists and the assertive nationalists. Early nationalists, they believed in constitutional method, but on the other hand, assertive nationalists, they believed that Indians should put pressure on the British government in order to attain Swaraj. And again, during the Surat session in 1907, again the dispute occurred between these early nationalists and the assertive nationalists. The reason for the dispute was, it was about the appointment of the president of the Congress. The early nationalists suggested the name of Rash Bihari Ghosh, whereas the assertive nationalists wanted Lala Lajpat Rai to be the president of the Congress. So there was a dispute between these two groups. The matter was that appointment of the president of the Congress. One group, LA nationalists, they wanted a particular person as the president. On the other hand, assertive nationalists, they wanted another person. So the unpleasant quarrel and confusion between the early nationalists and the assertive when the session started on 26th December. So there was a unpleasant quarrel and confusion between these two groups. As a result, both of them, early nationalists and the assertive nationalists, they got separated from each other, and for 9 years the assertives were out of the Congress. Because of this, these two groups, they were separated from each other, and the assertives were out of Congress for 9 years. That is the split in the Congress. Now we will see the beliefs, objectives and methods of the assertive nationalist. Their beliefs. First we will discuss the beliefs of assertive nationalist. First one, the assertive nationalist had no faith in the British sense of justice and fair play. You can notice the difference between the early nationalist and the assertive nationalist. And the early nationalist, they believed in British sense of justice and fair play, but here assertive nationalists, they do not believe in British sense of justice and fair play. Second one, they deeply hated the foreign rule and had no faith in the assurance given by the British to the Indians. So the assertive nationalists, they did not trust the British government and the promises given by the British people, and they hated foreign rule and they supported the Swaraj. They denied that India could progress under the benevolent guidance of the British. Benevolent here means the good and the just guidance of the British. They did not believe. But the early nationalists, they believed that India could progress under British, under the benevolent guidance of British. And on the other hand, the assertive nationalists, they never believed and they denied that India could progress under the benevolent guidance of the British. And the assertive nationalists, they believed that the Indian themselves must work out their salvation. They declared that great sufferings and sacrifices were needed for this task. In order to make India free, the Indians should work hard. That was the policy of assertive nationalists. For that purpose, suffering and sacrifices were required. And they promoted and they said Indians should work for their freedom and it requires suffering and sacrifices. That is the beliefs of the assertive nationalist. Next point is the objectives of the assertive nationalist. And they had the aim of economic and administrative reforms. At the same time, the greatest objective, it was the Swaraj. And Swaraj was the ultimate goal of the national movement. But the definition of Swaraj, it varies from person to person. By Swaraj, the assertive nationalist meant different things. According to Tilak, possession of Indian control over the administrative machinery, but not the severance of Indian connection with Britain. That was the meaning of Swaraj according to Bala Gangadhar Tilak. Possession of Indian control over the administrative machinery, but not the severance. Severance means no separation of Indian connection with Britain. So he demanded for the possession of Indian control over the administrative machinery and administrative structure, but he did not want any kind of separation of Indian connection with Britain. And on the other hand, Bipin Chandra Pal, he said that the impossibility of Swaraj or self-government under British paramountcy. Paramountcy means supremacy. So according to Bipin Chandra Pal, it was impossible to attain Swaraj under the British supremacy and the British rule. And according to Aurobindo, the Swaraj is something absolute political independence. So the ultimate goal or the objectives of the assertive nationalist was to attain Swaraj. But this Swaraj, the definition of Swaraj, it varied from person to person. We had seen the beliefs and the objectives of the assertive nationalist, and now we will see the program and the methods of assertive nationalist. The first one, it is Revivalism. The assertive nationalist drew inspiration from the Indian philosophy and the religious beliefs of India. They tried to revive self-respect by referring to the past glory of India. To revive, to renew. They just tried their best to bring the past glory of India in order to inspire the people. So assertive nationalists drew inspiration from the past glory of India, especially they took the elements from the Indian philosophy and the religious beliefs of India. And with this purpose, Tilak revived the Shivaji festival in 1895, and the assertive nationalists projected Chandragupta Vikramaditya, Rana Pratap and Shivaji as national heroes, whose memory could inspire the masses to fight against the British. What was the reason behind bringing the great leaders of India to the front line? The reason was to inspire people or the mass to fight against the British rule in India. That was the first method, revivalism. The next method, it was the Swadeshi movements. Swadeshi means producing everything within the boundary of one's own country, using those indigenous goods and rejecting the imported goods. So Swadeshi movement started, and according to the Swadeshi movement, people, they should use the products that is produced in one's own country, producing everything within the boundary, not depending on the foreign goods. And they promoted the use of indigenous, that means the goods produced in one's own country, and rejecting the imported goods. The Swadeshi idea was popularized by occasional bonfire of foreign sugar, salt and cloth. And the Vande Mataram slogan was shouted during the bonfire. So that was the Swadeshi movement. The second method, what is Swadeshi? Using indigenous product and producing everything or whatever the people want in their own country, within the boundary of one's own country. So the Swadeshi movement that got popularized, and many people joined with the Swadeshi movement. And the third one, boycott. Swadeshi and boycott were supplementary to each other. They were connected to each other. So by producing the goods of one's own within the boundary of one's own country, and then of course people should boycott or reject the foreign goods. Once a foreign good is boycotted, a parallel system using Swadeshi goods has to be created. Boycott not only meant not to use foreign goods, but it also included boycott of government services, titles, honors, etc. Besides, a man buying or selling foreign goods would be socially boycotted. The boycott thus was an effective weapon for harming British interest in India. Boycott was rejecting what is belonged to British government. That was the policy of boycott. By creating a parallel system of Swadeshi for a market for the Swadeshi good, and that also created, and here boycott means boycotting the government services, the titles, honors, and even a person, if he is buying the foreign goods, then he would be socially boycotted. And it was an effective weapon to have British interest in India. And the last one, it is the national education. The British government tried to prevent the participation of students in Indian national movement. Therefore, with Indian initiative and Indian capital, a large number of national schools and colleges were created for imparting education among these students and to protect from government repression. So the British government, they thought that the colleges and the schools, they inspire and they promote some activities against the British government, so they made some kind of restrictions. And so many restrictions were there. Because of that, some of the people in India, they took initiative for starting new colleges and schools with the Indian capital, with the Indian money. They started to establish new schools, the national schools and colleges, and to give education to the students. The Bengal National College was set up at Kolkata. The DAV movement in Punjab tried to spread education through various schools and colleges. However, the contents of the national education included secular education, political education, moral education, and vocational education. So these were the four different methods used by assertive nationalists: revivalism, Swadeshi, boycott, and national education. Now we will see the achievements of the assertive nationalist. First one, the assertive nationalist generated vigorous nationalism, self-assertion, and sacrifice. They were able to inculcate self-reliance in the masses. That means people started to believe in themselves, and people started to believe that they could do something for the country. And it generated, assertive nationalism generate a kind of nationalism and self-assertion. Second point is that the assertive leaders were able to inculcate national pride by extolling India's past. That point we have already discussed when we discussed the methods of assertive nationalism. So here, the assertive leaders, they put forward the past glory of India. So in a way, it created national pride among the masses. Third one, the Swadeshi movement gave a great stimulus to the Indian industries. Earlier, the Indian people were depending on the foreign goods and the products. Now, because of the Swadeshi movement, the Indian industry got a great development, and this affected the British goods and the production. Fourth one, assertive nationalists broadened the base of the national movement by involving the masses like the peasants, women, workers, and students. Earlier, the national movements were restricted to a particular place or with a particular people, but here, by assertive national movement, it included the peasant, the farmers, women, workers, and other students. Then fifth point, it is just connected with the reviving the India's past glory. So the assertive nationalists revived the Shakti cult in India. They invoked goddess Durga and Kali for strength to fight for the motherland. So Shakti cult started in India again, and they were praying to Durga and Kali in order to get the strength to fight against the British rule. And sixth one, the early nationalists, they did not believe in the early nationalists, they believed in the peaceful reforms, but the assertive nationalists, they did not believe in the peaceful reforms. And because of that, the assertive nationalists, they demanded for Swaraj, and it was in the masses or the Indians' duty to attain Swaraj by any means by putting pressure on the British government. And seventh one, the assertive nationalists, they introduced Swadeshi and boycott. That means promoting indigenous goods and production of the indigenous goods in India and using of indigenous product. And at the same time, boycotting whatever belonged to the British administration and British country. And now we will see the difference between the early nationalist and the assertive nationalist. These things we have already seen in the last chapter, and when we saw the beliefs and methods of the assertive nationalist. First one, in beliefs, what all are the differences in beliefs? First of all, the early congressmen, they had a faith in British sense of justice and fair play. On the other hand, the assertive nationalists, they had no faith in the British justice and the fair play. Second one, the early congressman looked to England for guidance and inspiration, and early congressmen thought that British could give a proper guidance to the people and in a better governance in India. But the assertive nationalists, they never believed in the guidance and the inspiration of British government, and they did not consider the guidance of English as something very important. And the assertive nationalists, they denied that India could progress under the benevolent guidance of the English. It was not possible for India to develop under the British guidance and the inspiration. That was the policy of the assertive nationalist. And the third one,
The early nationalists, they accepted the benefits of the British rule, just like the Western education, industrial development, and everything. But the assertive nationalists, they were against such a kind of practices. They introduced Indian schools and they considered the British rule as the reason for the poverty and backwardness in India. And the last point it is the early nationalists, they got inspiration from the Western philosophers like Mill, Burke, Spencer, Bentham, and they glorified Western ideas of liberalism. And they never looked towards the Indian philosophy and Indian ideas. They got the inspiration from the Western philosophers and the scholars, but the assertive nationalism they convinced the supremacy of Indian culture and tradition. They took the ideas and the ideologies from the Indian philosophy and they gave a color to the political color to Gita. They drew inspiration from India's past and tried to inculcate pride in India's glorious culture to generate spirit of patriotism. The next point is the difference in objectives. The early nationalists, they just believed in the British rule and the justice and the fair play provided by the British government. And they put forward the claim for self-government within the British Empire. That means they just wanted to, the early congressmen, they just wanted to follow the self-governing model that was practiced in Australia and Canada within the British Empire. On the other hand, the assertive nationalism or the assertive nationalists, they did not agree with such a kind of system, the system in which Indian rule within the self-government, within the British Empire. Such a kind of policy was not accepted by the assertive nationalists, and the assertive nationalists they put forward the idea that Swaraj is the ultimate goal of the country and their aim of assertive nationalists. They declare that Swaraj was the ultimate goal of the national movement. Tilak said, Swaraj is my birthright and I shall have it. They were not ready for any kind of compromise and they did not want any kind of government within the British Empire, but instead of that, they wanted a ultimately free country. Now, the differences in method. Early nationalists, they believed in the constitutional agitation within the four walls of law and slow orderly political progress. Constitutional agitation means arousing the mass or the people by giving appeals and the public discussion. So in a way, they were going with the peaceful methods for getting freedom and they were trying to build up a public opinion and whatever the government used to give that they provided to the people. And such kind of policies were criticized by the assertive nationalists. So whatever the early nationalists did, they were just going with the British rule and all their agitations, it was within the four walls of law. And these laws were made by the British government. And in a way, the assertive nationalists, they called the idea of early nationalists as the political mendicancy. Mendicancy means by begging, getting something. Instead of that, they went with some other methods. The assertive nationalists, they went with some other methods like revivalism, Swadeshi, boycott, national education. And all these things we have seen once. So you just once again go through and you will understand. The next point given in your textbook is the very important topic, that is contributions of the assertive nationalist. Here, the contributions of Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Lala Lajpat Rai, and Bipin Chandrapal are given. And I want you to write a short note on the contributions of the assertive nationalist. And it is very important and you must be thorough with at least 3 from each assertive nationalist. From Bal Gangadhar Tilak, you must be thorough with at least 3 points, and from Bipin Chandrapal, there also you have to study at least 3 points, and Lala Lajpat Rai, there also you should study 3 points. And you may please write a short note on the contributors' personalities. And if there is still any doubts, I will clarify. You can, once we are back to school, you can ask the doubts. So that is the end of the chapter. And here we had seen the first of all, we have seen about the assertive nationalism and the reasons for the growth of assertive nationalism. And what were the reasons? The famine and the plague, international events, the deteriorating economic condition, ill treatment of Indians in South Africa, and the repressive policy of Lord Curzon. And under the repressive policy of Lord Curzon, we had seen the Calcutta Corporation Act, University Act, and the Partition of Bengal. And among these three, you must study very thoroughly the Partition of Bengal, and that is very important. You can just go through your syllabus if you have any doubts. The syllabus is given in your, I think, page number 5. Then the split in the Congress, and you must focus on the split, like the split during the Surat session. And the reason for the split during the Surat session was that dispute developed over the issue of appointment of the president of the Congress. And the beliefs and the objectives or the methods of the assertive nationalist, that also we had seen, and the achievements of the assertive nationalist and the differences between the assertive and the early nationalist we had already seen from the last chapter. We had seen the policies and the beliefs of the early nationalist in the last chapter, and here in this chapter we saw the beliefs and the objectives of the assertive nationalist. By comparing that one, you can easily understand the differences between the early nationalist and the assertive nationalist. Anyway, it is given in your textbook, and you may please go through. And the last point, it was contributions of the assertive nationalist, and you may write a short note on the contributions of Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Bipin Chandra Pal, and Lala Lajpat Rai. That is the end of chapter 4. And from the exercise, you may write 5 short answer questions, first 5 short answer questions, and the first 2 questions on the structured questions. Thank you. Have a nice day.